Hello everyone, welcome to the Refinery tier list update. Refinery priority tier list update. This time we'll be covering Saizo, Oscar, Elincia, and Kagero. As per usual, I'll be going from worst to best. Now, the tier list I'm using looks a lot different this time. I decided to use a Game Press as a way to make tier list, because they actually have every new unit on there, so whenever, I work on anything when it comes onto a tier list, or, just in general, I can actually use this as a way to, make a tier list graph. Since I'm going to go back to school in a bit more than 2 months, I actually want to be able to cut down the amount of work I in any way I can, so I can actually still continue pumping out the videos and I still feel okay with how they turned out. So let me know how you feel about this. It's pretty new, so I know it might be putting a few people off. I have my few problems with it, which is mostly the fact that, well, the columns can only have 2 characters in them for whatever reason. But other than this, I feel like this is a fairly good compromise. Anyway, let's start with Kagero. Now, Kagero's dagger is a mess, which is ironic, because I did end up designing something myself that is very similar to this. The difference, however, is that the weapon I came up with had a different base effect. The Refine is similar to mine, but stronger. This was from my first episode of Refine theorycrafting, so if it looks like shit, that's why. Now, this is what the weapon was. I was using Sting Shuriken as a base. Effective against armored foes, Green Death +3. That was back when I didn't know whether or not they would be adding like just extra stats to a unit. After combat, if unit attack, inflicts death res -7 on target and foes. Now, as for the Refine, and yes, you can really tell this was really slapped together. Outside of the ideas for the weapons, I didn't know how to even stretch anything, so everything looks very sketchy. This is why I didn't have the correct font and so on. So this is where I say this is very similar, almost word for word. Except in my case it was limited to armored foes, because back then the only units that hit too much attack to the point that they could one-shot Kagero were armored units. So what I did is, if armored foes attack or counterattacks, reduce damage from foes' first attack by 30%. This was allowing her to hit Desperation a lot easier. And guess what I just did a year after I designed this? If unit initiates combat, reduce damage from the foe's first attack by 50%. Sounds familiar? If you don't believe me, the video is actually still up, even though I kind of want to just remove it because of how not good it is. It's been a year. I grew into the role of a YouTuber, I guess. And it shows, because goddamn, just no. There are so many issues, but oh well. So, yeah. The difference is they remove effective against armored unit, which made sense because Sting Shuriken was a weapon only Kagero was using in the entirety of the of Fates. In fact, the only way to get Sting Shuriken was to kill Kagero. So, at least I know that much from Conquest. I don't know about it in Birthright. So yeah, Sting Shuriken made a lot of sense, and unlike Kagero's Dart, actually had something going for her. Instead, this is what we got. Oh my god, what have we got? Kagero's Dart. Now, here's one of the main problems this weapon has. It doesn't synergize with anything it should synergize. If you have Death Blow, if you have Brazen, which this weapon pushes you in Brazen easily because of the Refine, it does not give you the attack of Brazen and Death Blow when it's calculating if your attack is higher than the enemy's. So the base effect becomes worthless if you use those skills as the A skill. So the idea, I guess, is to run Life and Death to make the base effect more consistent. And because you have Life and Death, the fucking Refine would make it easier for you to still take a hit. But why would you do that if you can just run any effective against Dagger? Because we already have an effective against every fucking weapon type outside of Infantry. Sorry, Poison Dagger does not exist. 5 Might is terrible. Get out of my face with that garbage. Especially in this day and age where 60 defense on fucking infantry unit is considered barely surprising. It's just common at that point, especially because Fallen core in. So, yeah, Kagero's Dart is awkward as a result. The only thing that will actually help your attack and count toward it are Fury, attack plus 3, attack speed 2, and such skills, and like Life and Death. Because those actually increase your attack on the stat page. The at start of combat clause, I've been explaining this a lot in the Refined Theory Crafting series, but I will also here, is a clause that take your stats outside of combat in consideration. It does not use any stat in combat in consideration. That's why Heavy Blade is just if unit's attack is over foe's attack instead of at start of combat if unit's attack is over foe's attack. It just means Brazen don't work, Death Blow don't work, any of those skills don't work, drives don't work, buffs don't work outside of like attack tactic. You know, buff that are visible. Which makes the weapon awkward as shit. As for the second effect, it has only one real use, and it's the fact that it can be a gimmicky defense mechanism for your team in Aether raids. It is extremely gimmicky, and that's basically all it has going for itself. That is a shame. Because that just basically turns back to what Seliph has received. Seliph has had a pref that's just about this bad. Seliph's pref does basically nothing to help him, and just makes him a meat shield. So it's easy to proc proc just Wings of Mercy, and just go from there, you know, just kill a bunch of things through Wings of Mercy and not much else. The debuff she inflicts on everyone is definitely welcome and makes Gale Force a lot easier because you actually do damage consistently. But yet again, if you take that out of the equation, it's not much, is it? It really isn't. Which is, again, a shame. And on stream, most people were suggesting this set. You run into one problem with this. Kagero becomes too bulky, and therefore Wings of Mercy becomes inconsistent. And because it becomes inconsistent, it's just might as well use a different weapon altogether. Plus, it's super expensive and doesn't really give you anything at the end of the day. So, yeah, it's just very awkward. And that's why it's B tier on the list. Most of the thing you can do with the dagger, you don't need to refine it for. Because, like I keep saying on every refine tier, on every weapon refine priority tier list update I make, I base this off of how good the refine is, not the base weapon. That's why Nephany is so low. If Nephany's refine was, if I was considering the weapon itself, I would say it's at least S tier, even possibly S plus tier. But it's not the case, so I'm not going to be lying, and I'm just going to be like, well, Steady Stance is cool, but not fantastic, which it is. Cooldown -1 and armor effectiveness, however, that is insane. But you don't need to waste 2 to get this. So yeah. Moving on to Oscar. Oscar is honestly better than I expected him to get. Obviously, I made a refine for him. It was actually not that long ago, in fact. Pretty sure it was last month that I gave him a refine. If you want a comparison's sake, this is the refine I gave him. And here it is. It basically has a very similar idea, which is just basically, you know, buffing infantry and cav, though the cav part is kind of awkward. But it's awkward on my weapon as well. So, well, actually, at first I wanted to do infantry and cav, but I thought that was awkward, so instead I made it axe and bow unit to refer to Rolf and Boyd. As for the lower than 50% to get 4 across the board, which is kind of just a slightly worse parry, it's because I wanted to basically make him a Wings of Mercy unit. A Wings of Mercy unit because at the end of the day, this weapon was meant to be a slightly worse version of what parry has if you're just considering the stat gain and the fact that parry has cooldown -1. However, to make up for it, it's a brave weapon depending on what ally is nearby. So, yeah, you get the idea. I kind of wanted to do a triangle attack based on the fact that Oscar, Boyd, and Rolf can do a triangle attack in Radiant Dawn. No, Path of Radiance, my bad. They kind of went with the same idea to some extent, but instead they kind of just went in a more, what's the word? Broad term, because Grail mercenaries are mostly infantry and cavs. There are very few flyers on there, and armored units. Do we even have armored units? Oh yeah, we do. We have like 1 or 2. Armored units are not really common, so obviously they're going to go with the majority, and that's infantry and cavalry. It's a bit too broad for my liking, but oh well. It's a buff of 3 attack and 3 speed. That's very similar to Camilla. Most people have actually mentioned Camilla. And yes, to some extent you could even say Camilla has a worse pref than he does, because he actually has cooldown -1 on top of it. At the cost of 1 attack and 1 speed, that's actually a fair trade, right? Well, that's where the difference begins. That's why he's A+ tier. I consider him decently worth it, but not, like, essential. Camilla is an S tier, right? So you might be wondering, why is that the case? Well, it's quite simple. For one, if you're just considering a buff, Marv is definitely better when it comes down to it, because it's 2 across the board, it's easier to do, it's a bit less restrictive. Gerskogel actually does the same buff as this weapon does, and Lucina has a more tendency to stick close over allies. Oscar is typically a Gale Force unit, and they even give you the cooldown -1 for it. However, it's also a cavalry unit, which requires you to go out of your way to not be near your allies, typically, because, well, that way you have just more reach, because that's just how cav goes. And if you don't have anyone near you, it's just a cooldown -1 weapon. If you use him as just a buff, Marv does that job better, so he's kind of like in between of both of them, or in between of Brave Lucina and... well, yeah, Brave Lucina and to some extent Camilla. Another thing is that Camilla's weapon actually synergizes insanely well with her. Flyer units do not struggle sticking together. As a matter of fact, mobility is key when it comes down to flyers, which is why right now they are some of the strongest type of units, if not the strongest type of unit currently. So, yeah, you may imagine, okay, well, what then? Well, Camilla can actually use goads a lot better than cavalry unit can use goads. And she can use aerobatics to combo with horses for weapon. And she can also use flyer formation to combo with flyers. It's very easy to combo goads into her weapon. You can combo goads with Oscar, but it's definitely a lot more awkward and clunky. So, yeah, it's definitely not nearly as good. Not to mention, in a world where Able exists, that is a yikes from me, dog. That is a huge yikes from me. Because the thing is, Oscar can actually end up having more buff than, well, less buff than what Able has. Except instead of cooldown -1, Able has a brave 60 might weapon. Like, what am I supposed to say that would make Oscar even remotely better than Able? There's nothing I can really say, so A+ it is. As for the build, it's definitely a lot more gimmicky than everything else. Like I said, horse units are typically Gale Force users, and you can actually pull that pretty well. It just typically, instead of running Loyal Great Lance, you'll probably be running a Speed Refine because that's more consistently helpful. You actually get the 3 speed always, instead of only if you are remotely around the other units, which, as I said, is awkward. So, alright, moving on to Saizo. Yes, Saizo is not the unit I consider the best of the bunch. You'll see why once I get to Elincia and why she's actually S+ tier. So, Saizo. Saizo is the other refine I said that they actually basically copied over me. Or at least it feels like they copied over me, except that refine I gave to a different character. And it's funny, because a lot of people actually just tagged me on Sage's Discord to tell me, dude, they literally took your refine. It's not exactly a 100% word for word, but it's actually surprisingly close. It was... I did this in March, actually, so... You know... This is the refine I made. Man, that sure sounds familiar. Except the base effect is obviously different, and I actually put more effort in doing the icon than they did. Fucking hell. Switch the color palette of the background. Okay, that's it. What? However, the way I actually made the weapon work when it comes down to War God's Tome is way better than Saizo's Star. The problem when it comes down to Saizo is that he actually needs to hit something for the debuff to actually take place, and then the second time he hits, he has the 6 across the board. That's not to say it's terrible, it really isn't, it's actually a pretty good refine. It's just... how can I put it? War God's Tome, you just run the 2 ploy you're missing, plus the weapon, you are already debuffing all 4 stats so you can take advantage of it immediately. You can't do that with a Smoke Dagger. You actually have to wait after the first hit, which can work with a Dancer, or also it can work without a Dancer if you run Rid and Guntra, because they both have a -6 attack and speed debuff that they inflict to lowest res and lowest def respectively for Red and Guntra, which gives you an option. It works fairly well, and you know, you can actually make that work with Saizo. However, there are units that will completely shut down debuff, such as Idun, so do be careful when it comes down to it. So yeah, it's just basically a copy of War God's Tome, in a way. Like I said, Slizo is definitely solid, and that's why he's A+. I consider him worth investing in, because that's what A+ is for. It's just... he's a bit niche, is the best way I can put it. He will work on certain teams. He will. In fact, he might be even the star of certain teams. However, it really does require your team to work with him. If you don't have that, well, that's just tough luck. As for people that have seen my Show Me Your Build, you already know more or less how I'm going to build him if I were to actually have the resources. Water Sweep is the best way, and Pulse Smoke also synergizes really well with his dagger, debuffing everything by 6 and also, you know, removing charges for specials. This actually helps him quite a bit. So, yeah, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? It does require you to actually have a dancer if you want to rely on this, or ideally, you want to be attacking, back off, and then enemy phase the units. But it's still gimmicky. The second set is definitely more akin to this. So, yeah. One of the reasons I'm using Sorcery Blade is because, well, he has a below average attack, but quite a few units have too little res, so you can actually exploit this and actually hit them in their res, which is kind of ironic. Now that I think about it, Slizo should have gotten Sorcery Blade, or just a Sorcery Blade that just works if he's alone. The guy literally blows himself up. He has a flaming shuriken that hits magic. In fact, the only reason Felicia is really decent in Conquest is because of that fucking dagger. And you get it from killing Saiza, or at least beating him. So, very strange they went with that refined, honestly, but... oh well, I guess it needs to still be Felicia's niche or something, even though, you know, the main reason it was Felicia's niche to begin with was not because of some shit plate, it was because of the flaming shuriken you got from Saiza. But whatever, instead of taking Sting Shuriken for Kigero and Flaming Shuriken for Saizo, they decided to go with the weapon that had their name attached to it. That was a mistake in itself, but oh well, it's just kind of what it is, isn't it? But yeah, this is a more aggressive set. Obviously, like I said, Rid and Guntra are some of the best unit you can combo into this unit. So, yeah, let's move on to Elincia. Now, Elincia was by no means an underpowered unit. 11 might, brave weapon, -2 speed, which meant that her weapon gave +3 speed, -5 speed, because of the brave penalty, was already insane. The fact is, if you take a speed refine, you actually do not have a speed penalty anymore. In fact, it's quite the opposite, you get speed. Who thought of this? Now, Swiss Sparrow is by no means typically a good refine. In fact, it's typically just very unoriginal and doesn't help the unit enough. However, when I ended up sitting down and think about it, it's just basically a more consistent Alm. Yes, Alm, of all things. Because, think of it, Alm has 30 attack. No, 30 speed. I think 33 attack. That's 49 attack and 30 speed. Right? So quadding is already fairly difficult, isn't it? Alright. Alright. Then you take a midi. What's 11 plus 4 plus 34? 49 attack. What's 36 minus 2 plus 4? Oh, what's that? 38? You end up having the same attack with much more speed. You end up quadding easily, and on top of that, you don't have an HP threshold you have to reach. Yeah. What the fuck were they thinking? I feel like I sound like a VGN when I'm saying this like this, but yes, a lot of things like this just make me go, why? Why did they think this was fine? And yes, the only thing Ulm really has over Elincia at that point is the dragon effectiveness. Naga. So yeah, it's kind of irrelevant. Not to mention, Naga is a flyer. So you can just synergize that with Elincia like it's fucking nothing. They work together well. Just... So yeah, Elincia becomes insane overall. It's kind of insane when you think about it. So, yeah, just very, like, uninteresting refine from the what are they doing with it plan. But from the usability plan, this is insane. If you have attack plus and buffs, you hit so much attack. In fact, just look at this. Does this look fine to you? Because she doesn't need to go with anything that gives speed at that point. Well, if you feel like it, if you think her defense is not good enough, you can just run Swift Impact. She has access to it. So, with Amity and Death Blow, that's 12 attack. That's 70 attack and 44 speed on a brave fucking weapon. Actually, 70 attack, 48 speed. My bad. With 34 as your lowest stat when it comes down to Def and Res, and still having 42 HP. Why? It's very similar to Keaton in a way, except you can quad constantly with this, which just... What were they thinking? This is ridiculous. Elincia is insane with this refine. She can do so much with it. Honestly, as you've seen from all 4 units that are in S+ tier, typically if a unit is up there, it's because it has a Brave effect. A Brave effect with an effectiveness, or a Brave effect with a cooldown -1, or a Brave effect with just stupid amounts of stats. So, yeah. And, you know, it needs to not be nearly as clunky. For example, Kain. Kain is an S tier, despite having a Brave effect. But the thing with Kain is that it's definitely a bit awkward because he's a cav unit, but needs to hold back to stay around your allies. It's not great, is it? It works. It can work, but it's iffy. That said, Elincia has no drawback. Ulm has a drawback, but Mystic Boost completely negates it. Katria is a drawback, and so does Est, but flyer units sticking together is not a problem whatsoever. Est is so fucking powerful, I would literally put her an extra tier above. Because she has so much attack, she ends up killing on her first 2 blow most unit of the game. And the only units that can actually typically tank her are armored, and because she has an effectiveness, she just kills them anyway. She kills fucking Surtur, for fuck's sake, with her first 2 hits. Why? That gives you an idea. But yeah, Elincia is definitely no pushover, and frankly doesn't need any kind of support to even work at that point. Support helps, but is it required? Nah, man. But yeah, this was my review for the new Refine units. Hopefully you found it interesting and found a few new things. Check out my Refinement theorycrafting series if you think that the refines I did came up with were interesting. So, yeah. I would say though, skip the first 2 episodes. I was just not good at the time. I'm going to be honest. There's a reason why I kind of did the series, and then there was a 6-month gap. I just did not feel I had the skills to actually pull that kind of series off. And then 6 months later, it's because of Gast that I actually ended up doing the series again. I had learned quite a few more things when it came down to paint.net, so I had a better grasp of how to actually work with this. But more importantly, I wanted to do this more. Because if you've seen the Gast Legendary Unit package deal, I think, I was the one that designed the special, and the weapon, and the C-skill. So yeah, you know. But yeah, I think that's enough talking. I'm going to let you go now. So as per usual, have a nice one, everyone. See you all next time.